This is the new BMW X3 Plug-In Hybrid. In this video, I want to find out what the real-world driving range is. I'm going to test the range on regional roads to figure out the maximum range possible. I'll also do a second test on the highway at higher average speeds to find the minimum range. I also wanted to see how long it takes to charge the battery. This is the new model of the X3. BMW introduced this generation in the second half of 2024. This X3 packs a 2-liter 4-cylinder petrol engine combined with a synchronous electric motor. This electric motor is integrated into the 8-speed Steptronic transmission. The power from both the petrol engine and the electric motor can be sent to all 4 wheels via BMW xDrive. It accelerates from 0 to 100 km per hour in 6.2 seconds. It feels punchy enough, but not extremely fast. Especially if you compare it to your average electric car, the system output is 299 horsepower. The top speed is 215 km per hour. And for more stats, the torque sits at a nice 450 Newton meters. The base price starts around 70,050 euros. This X3 has received a larger battery compared to the previous generation. It's a lithium-ion battery sitting under the rear seats with a net capacity of 19.7 kilowatt hours. The WLTP range is between 81 and 90 kilometers. The boot space holds 460 to 1,600 liters. The regular petrol version has a capacity of 570 to 1,700 liters, so you do lose about 100 liters. I think it's mostly in the boot floor, which ramps up slightly towards the rear seats. I don't get the impression I've lost much headroom though. In any case, there is enough headroom in the back, even though you are sitting on top of the battery. I'm going to test the range on regional roads first. I wanted to figure out the car's maximum range by testing it at lower average speeds. I'm doing the test in the evening to avoid being held up by too much traffic. At the start of the test, the battery is fully charged to 100%. The range indicator shows 79 kilometers. I did this test in December and it was about 10 degrees Celsius at the start. Before I can hit the regional roads, I have to get out of Brussels first. Honestly, in terms of consumption, starting the test like this is no gift. On the contrary, in city traffic, I'm seeing consumption of 24.2 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. After 15 kilometers of fairly heavy city traffic, I've already drained nearly a quarter of the battery. The counter shows only 65 kilometers of range left by the time I finally reach the regional roads where I can cruise. At the first check-in with the battery at half charge, consumption has already dropped to 21.1 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. I've driven 45 kilometers and the indicator still shows 44 kilometers remaining. That's looking promising. The temperature has dropped to 7 degrees in the meantime. With the battery at 25%, the indicator shows 22 kilometers of range left. I've driven nearly 75 kilometers now and consumption is sitting at 20 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. For the final stretch, I'm leaving the regional roads and heading back towards the city. Let's just jump to the final result. I finished with a solid 96.6 kilometers range when the combustion engine kicked back in. That's pretty impressive and actually beats the WLTP range despite the lower temperatures. I think there was a little bit more range in it if I hadn't hit that city traffic earlier. If you want to read through the results of this test at your own pace, head over to my site. I will link it below. You'll find not just this test, but range tests for dozens of other cars and nearly 400 test drive videos. Okay, we know the maximum range, but what is the minimum range? To find out, I'm going to drain the battery on the highway at higher average speeds. The battery is recharged. Now the indicator shows 92 kilometers range. For practical reasons, I'm starting the test at 8:30 a.m. in Brussels. I hit the highway and had to drive a bit slower at first, but afterwards I could cruise comfortably at 120 kilometers per hour. The temperature is around 7.5 degrees. Halfway through, consumption is at 22.4 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. I've driven 34 kilometers and there's still 45 kilometers on the range indicator. Let's look straight at the result. I drove the battery completely empty and at a solid 72.8 kilometers, the battery was empty and the combustion engine kicked back in. I noted that the average consumption stood at 23.1 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. Now let's look at how long it takes to charge the battery. Tech-wise, the X3 is equipped with an onboard charger capable of 11 kilowatts AC charging. According to BMW, the battery can go from 0 to 100% in 2 hours and 15 minutes. I started my real-world test at 5% and the dashboard told me it would take 2 hours and 11 minutes to go from 5% to 100%. So 2 hours 15 from 0 to 100% seems accurate. You can't fast charge the X3, that's a small downside. Because with Mercedes, for example, some plug-in hybrids do offer fast charging. If you can charge at home, it doesn't matter much, but if you have to rely on public charging, I'd find it handy to have fast charging. What do you guys think? Would you want fast charging on a plug-in hybrid? Let me know in the comments. In the previous generation, you could also fully charge the battery while driving. After some digging, I found out you can still do this in the newest generation, but only to a very limited extent. There is a maintain charge function. I did a test on the highway. After driving for 22 minutes at 120 kilometers per hour and covering 35 kilometers, I gained 7 kilometers of driving range. I get the impression you can't get much more than that 7 kilometers back. The consumption during that run came out to 9.2 liters per 100 kilometers. Speaking of fuel consumption, I did a test drive starting with a completely empty battery. After 172 kilometers, I ended up with a consumption of 8.3 liters per 100 kilometers. Of which 34 kilometers was driven electrically. Wondering how much range you have on fuel alone? Well, the tank capacity is 50 liters, so at the consumption of, let's say, 8.3 liters per 100 kilometers, you can drive about 600 kilometers. One last thing you might be wondering is, how are the performance levels with an empty battery? I did an acceleration test with a sufficiently charged battery and then another one with an empty battery. I didn't immediately notice a big difference. With just the electric motor, you have 184 horsepower. That gives you a top speed of 140 kilometers per hour. Purely on the petrol engine, you have 190 horsepower. I did have the impression that even with an empty battery, I had more power available than just those 190 horses. So perhaps some capacity is kept in reserve for that boost. In conclusion, I can say that the range of the BMW X3 xDrive 30e plug-in hybrid at lower temperatures of around 7 to 10 degrees lies between 96 kilometers on regional roads and 72 kilometers on the highway. In heavy city traffic, I think you'll be sitting closer to that 72 kilometer range figure. All in all, very nice results. In the summer, you might be able to squeeze out even better numbers. Want to read all the details and figures from this test again? Definitely check my website. Thanks for watching and see you next time. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Which car would you like to see a range test for next on this channel? Let me know in the comments.